So I'm very happy this evening to introduce Sue Timms. And Sue's going to talk to us this evening about oak galls. So Sue, if I can hand it over to you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Alan, and hello everyone. It's nice to see people here. I'm very pleased to see we've got two experts here as well. Chris Leach, who's a founder member of the British Plant Gall Society, and also Roy Lemon, who's does a lot of gall recording in Rutland. So if I make any mistakes, I know you'll stop me and correct me, and I shan't mind at all. I'm not an expert. I started looking at galls a few years ago and got hooked, as you do. And so I just wanted today to share some slides of a very small, a very narrow group of gall causes. These are galls caused on oak trees by a tiny parasitic wasp in the cynipid family. And I've picked these really because they are some of the most attractive and obvious galls, and I think they're probably the ones that would hook you and get you interested. But there are hundreds and hundreds of gall causes in Britain, and they're not just in the wasp family. There are flies, bugs, beetles, lots of gall mites, bacteria, viruses, even some plants, fungi, whole range of organisms cause galls to appear. And basically a gall is an abnormal growth of the plant caused under the influence of another organism. So usually what happens is that the adult organism, if we're talking about insects, lays an egg on part of the plant, and that the gall then starts to form once the larva begins to feed. And I have to say, I don't understand the chemistry and biology of that. It's incredibly complicated. So we're just going to talk about oak galls today, but one very important thing to get across really is that gall causes tend to be quite specific in the plant that they target, and this is very true of these little gall wasps. A few galls are more are less specific in what they want, but the majority will just form galls on a specific plant. So the way you get into understanding galls and identifying them is to identify the plant first, and that immediately gets you into the keys that are both published and online, and will help you pin it down. So that's my preamble really. The first slide here, I've stolen a picture of a tiny gall wasp here. Well done for Craig Mabbott there for photographing that. He reared it, I understand, from a gall and photographed it just as it emerged. It's tiny, a few millimeters long, I think probably about 2 millimeters long. And really they're so rarely seen or photographed that unless you actually collect the gall and wait for something to emerge, you probably won't see them. We've got about 50 different species, I understand, that make galls on oak in Britain of gall wasps. I'm just going to cover 20 today, all of which have been recorded in Leicestershire and Rutland, some of which are extremely common, and you'll find on the very first oak tree you look at probably. Just to say that a few gall wasps make fantastic galls on other plants, and everyone will know the robin's pincushion or Bediga gall, and that's caused by a little gall wasp as well. And there are a few other plants, but generally they seem to have homed in and I suppose evolved alongside oak trees. The other thing I just wanted to say before I get stuck in is that there's a lot of new galls arriving in Britain. And I've just listed a few here that have been quite recent arrivals. Once they arrive, they sometimes seem to get extremely common very, very quickly. They've got great sort of colonizing power, I suppose. And I'm no doubt that will continue really. I just was wanting to introduce a really strange topic, which you have to consider when you're looking at gall wasps. And this is the fact that they have alternating sexual and asexual generations. So one generation is normal, 2 insects mating, laying fertile eggs, normal exchange of genetic material. But then the females from the next generation can lay fertile eggs without mating, which is parthenogenesis. And quite a few insects can do this, but it's really quite strange. With galls, it results in a totally different set of galls each generation. And the example I've got below is the current galls, which are the sexual galls of a very common gall found on oak. And then the little spangled galls are caused by the asexual generation. So completely different parts of the tree. You wouldn't think they were the same creature caused it. And sometimes even more strangely, some species will actually use a different species of oak in which to lay their alternate generation eggs. I'm just going to go on now to my third slide, and this is a list of 20 galls that I was going to talk about today. So the first chunk at the top are fairly common, and I think you'll probably find most of them just looking around. A lot of them are on almost every oak tree that you'll look at, and not just ancient oaks, it's also small saplings as well. Most of the photos in the presentation are from me, but I have borrowed a few from other people, and I've got these from the Nature Spot website. So again, if you wanted to refresh your memory, it's always worth looking there. I'm going to finish off with a few uncommon species, many of which I haven't seen or photographed in Leicestershire, and that lovely photograph there by Barbara Cooper of the cotton wool gall formed on oak. I'd love to see that, but I never have, unfortunately. Okay. So the first one is an artichoke gall, and this is where the bud scales actually become enlarged and grow into these very strange but very attractive structures. And these are very common, and you'll find that they do persist year on year as well. So you'll find the old ones as well as the new ones developing. And I'm afraid the sexual generation here, it's very unlikely anyone would see it. It's extremely inconspicuous. The second one you're likely to find, this is actually caused on the leaves of oak, and you can see that it causes these strange light swellings. And the one there in the picture, you can see there's the hole in the top of it is caused by the insect emerging from the gall. And it's this one that, that first photograph I showed, a photo taken by Craig Mabbott, it was actually from a gall of this type. And these are reasonably common, I would say. Another one here, the ramshawn gall. So that's actually from the bud of the oak, and it grows into this very strange elongated structure. Sometimes they're sort of branched and strange composite structures. This is a very new one. It's only been around since '97, but again, fairly common. And I think, you know, you would find it very, very quickly. They're several inches long, some of these galls that develop. So quite distinctive. Another recent arrival, I don't know whether this has got a common name, but Andreika grossularii, really attractive galls. They start a very green, sort of slightly sticky look to them, but they quite quickly develop into these beautiful crimson colours. You do find that quite a lot with galls as they mature. And this one, if you cut it open, as I have done in the other slide, you'll see that there are several chambers inside it. It's a very sort of woody structure by then. And there is actually a little wasp grub in one of those chambers still. Very similar to the common knopper gall on acorns. But if you cut that open, you'll just find one chamber inside. And sometimes they can, you know, they can look very similar to each other. I don't think this is all that common, actually. I found it in a few places, but certainly not on every oak. And again, another recent arrival. Probably one of the commonest ones you'll see anywhere are the marble galls. And these are often called oak apples, but wrongly, I think, by people. They are about the size of a largish marble. And again, they have a single exit hole, which you can see quite clearly in that picture there. And they do persist again beyond the season. So you will find them through the winter, getting slowly older and more shriveled and darker brown. And this, Chris Leach is an expert on these galls here, and he gave a fascinating talk to the Entomological Society last year about their use. They were deliberately imported into Britain and were used to make ink from their very, very, very extremely concentrated source of tannin. Next one here, this is the true oak apple gall, and it's a much different structure. It's again formed from a bud and very soft and spongy and often flushed with pink. And again, you will find these masses will just hang around all winter, getting more and more sort of decaying and nasty as the years go by, as the months go by. And these will have multiple wasps inside. So if you cut those open, you'll find lots and lots of chambers inside, each with their own little grub. You will also find probably some animals that shouldn't be there. They're known as inquilines or parasitoids. And these are other insects that take advantage of the gall cores and the gall to actually use it themselves for food or for shelter. That's quite common. I can't remember these statistics, but literally hundreds of insects have been known to emerge from a single one of these galls. The cherry gall here is a particularly lovely one. This just forms sort of sitting almost precariously on the underside of a leaf. It's lovely when you get several together like that one. There's no sort of very obvious point of attachment on the other side, but they are quite large. They're again marble sized. A couple more galls here that are formed on acorns or buds. So the first one is the knopper gall, which you're probably very familiar with. And it forms around acorns and often will almost enclose the acorn in this sort of strange and eventually becoming quite woody growth. And strangely enough, this one also, the sexual generation of these are on a different species of oak, the turkey oak, which is again extremely strange really. A turkey oak not native to Britain at all. Not sure when it was introduced. It's probably a Victorian introduction, I think, but I'm not really certain. But obviously these at some stage have found their way to Britain. And the other slide on there is the cola nut gall, very similar in many ways to marble galls, but they've got this very rough, scaly surface with sort of little scurfy outbreaks on it, and they're often a dark greeny brown colour. Again, reasonably common. Apparently they also have the sexual generation on turkey oaks. So again, quite a strange, complex evolutionary path that's been taken there. A gall you find extremely commonly at the moment. It seems to be having a bumper year around me anyway, up here in the National Forest. These are tiny little things. They're only a couple of millimeters across, but they have an absolutely beautiful sort of texture and shine to them. So hence their common name, the silk button gall. And you will find sometimes a whole leaf almost completely covered in them. So just turn up as always with looking at insects and other invertebrates, it's often a good idea to look underneath the leaf rather than on top. But you will find that there are little yellow chlorotic dots on top of the leaf where these are formed, which can often lead you to that. And I've just photographed, the other photograph there is the much less obvious, quite discreet really, sexual generation, which is like a little blister that forms on the surface of the leaf. This one is on the upper surface, and it's got these little radiating lines around it. And again, you can see the exit hole there. The two totally different galls. You would hardly know that they were from the same species. Next one is one of these spangled galls. There's quite a large number of these different species found here. This is a smooth spangled gall, which is often this lovely crimsony colour with a sort of little raised rim around it. But more often than not, it's this rather strange sort of waxy greenish white colour. You sometimes find them sort of halfway in between. The books nearly always tell you that they're this bright crimson, but I haven't found that to be the case myself. The oyster gall here, very like, there's a pea gall as well that you can find on oak, which is superficially quite similar. But if you look very carefully at the sort of bottom right picture, you can see a tiny flap of skin, a membrane, I suppose. It looks like skin more than anything else at the base of the gall, and this will continue when the gall drops off. You can see the remains of that, just as little flaps of membrane sticking out of the midrib on the underneath of the leaf. They often go this quite nice speckledy red look, which is, but more often than not, they're a sort of slightly dull greenish browny colour. And finally, I'm onto my less common galls now. So those are all the commoner ones. This is a very recent arrival in Britain. I think I'm not sure when it arrived, sort of first decade of the millennium, I think. But it forms these very similar in some ways to the oyster gall, but they won't have that little flap of skin. And they do sometimes form on the petioles and become a nice red colour, I've found. And this is found on Turkey oak. It's always worth looking on Turkey oak for these. We haven't got very many records in the county for them at the moment, but I suspect it's more to do with overlooking. When you look at them closely, they're shaped like a little Cornish pasty, really, but only 2-3 millimetres long, quite small. My next slide, really, this is a composite one of pictures taken by other people, and I've got these pictures just from Nature Spot, and you'll find that there are a few other species on there of sunnipids. Again, these are quite hard to find, so we've got a few here caused on buds, the Andreika calidoma, the corruptrix, which Martin found, I think, in Prior's Coppice. We've got a couple that Annie Smith found upon Charnwood Lodge, Andreicus gemmeus and Andreicus glandulae, which are very, very hard to find. You need to have good sharp eyes. And finally, the one at the top in the middle is very unusually, it's formed in the bark of the oak. So very hard to find, and I've never seen it. I don't know. I have looked, but I've never actually found them. So you actually find these sort of almost embedded within the bark of the oak. Okay. So finally, I think you've probably been discussing this already when I've disappeared, but where do you find out more about it? Well, the first place to start is the British Plant Gall Society. I've given the web address there. They publish a journal called Cecidology. I don't know, Cecidum, is that the Latin for gall, I think? And you can see the picture on the cover of the latest one there is actually of a marble gall with the little gall causer insect, Andreicus cholerae, just perched there. And if you get interested in galls, it's really worth joining. You'll find out all the news of new galls arriving in Britain, which is very, very interesting. And also some really interesting articles written there, including some by Chris, I have to say. If you go onto NatureSpot website, as I mentioned before, it's a good place to start. We've got photographs of all the galls that I've shown you today, but also lots of other galls caused by other organisms on there. And we have got a category, if you look in the species gallery, called galls, so that'll take you straight to them. Very difficult to know how to find them sometimes on websites because, of course, they're so many different creatures cause the galls that some are found within flies, some bugs, etc. And finally, I think I heard Chris mentioning this British Plant Galls book. It doesn't cover very many galls in my experience, but the photographs are absolutely beautiful in there, really stunning. And I would, it is worth looking, getting just for those and for the very interesting background information that Michael Chinnery gives. The book I use, though, is British Plant Galls, the second edition, by Margaret Redfern and Peter Shirley. And this is in the Aid Gap series from the Field Studies Council. And it's not a very glossy or posh production at all, but it does have keys that work. And a lot of line drawings, and you'll find that it will help you find the answer to most of the ones that you find. If not, I should say that I found Margaret and Peter very willing to help you if you have good photographs to send them. I understand though there is a third edition due to come out sooner or later with a lot more galls in it. I don't know, Chris may be able to tell us a little bit more about that, I don't know. Finally, this is for the real experts. If you do get interested in oak galls, there is a specific book on them, but I have found that you can download the part 2 of it, which covers the insect descriptions of the gall causers and the parasitoids and inquilines who are hitching a free ride really in the gall that's being caused by another insect. I haven't really used it myself. It's one for the experts, but I guess, there if you need it. Okay, that was the end of my talk. Actually, shall I stop sharing my screen now? And if anyone's got any questions, happy to do what I can.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sue. Thanks for coming back and finishing the talk off. Sally's put a message in the chat window. The turkey oak was introduced around the 1700s.
Oh, was it? Oh.
So obviously that's given a lot of gall causers chance to utilise it, catch up and utilise it. So we have had we did do some questions, but I'm sure Sue will be happy to answer any others.
I was just going to say I like the Facebook page for the British Gall Society, and you can post your photographs on there, and people like Peter Shirley and others will respond to try and give you some identification.
Yeah, they're really helpful people, and it's certainly worth following that. And of course, again, there's also news of new galls as well appears on there. So yes, good, well worth following.
The new keys should be published next year. This
Right.
is from Margaret and Peter. They're writing away vigorously at the moment because I keep sending them new names and new finds, and they have a little moan, and we'll have to change it. Yeah, but they're doing very well. Yeah.
Good.
Can I just say about your Neurotrus saliens? It's quite a fun thing. I first saw it in, believe it or not, the training ground at Sandhurst. I wasn't training myself. I got invited down, but the the gall, if you detach it and get a few in your hand, they jump.
Oh, do they? Oh,
Yes, like jumping beans. That's where they get the names from. Salience means hopping.
of course it does. Yeah.
And it's about the only, now we don't know why, but it's one of those fun things, you know, they hop.
I shall try that. I found mine at County Hall, just wandering around aimlessly in my lunch break, as you do. Well, just released my desk, and I haven't really found it in very many other places. But
No, well, it was only first reported in this country in 2006, I think, 2005, 2006. Yeah. So it's quite recent, and it's crawled. We called the gall you showed slug, because it looks a bit like a slug heading up, but it doesn't move, obviously, but it's moving very slowly north.
Thanks, Chris. Has anyone else got any questions for Sue or Chris or anyone? No?
I wish my students had been like this. It would have been an easier life when I was a younger man.
We did do some questions during our intermission. The ice cream lady came out with her tray and stood at the front while you were gone, Sue. So we did some questions then as well. So
the cherry gall you showed has sort of up and down seasons. Recently, I haven't seen many of them, but about 4 or 5 years ago, I went with Maggie Frankham to Burrows Wood up in Ratby, and it was like a cherry orchard.
yeah,
So we thought we'll go back and have a look at these later on, and when they fell, and virtually every one of them had been pecked into by a great tit. You can tell by the cut marks. So they were having a meal on the wasp.
they do seem to vary in frequency of year on year, don't they?
All right. Yeah.
I
I predicted there wouldn't be any common spangled galls last year, and locally there wasn't, because the year before, every one of them seemed to be attacked by a little larvae of a midge that lives under the spangled gall, called Parasitoids galliaperda. It's one of those names I've learned and remembered.
Okay.
But we did a little survey, and something like 80 to 95% of the spangled galls had this little orange larvae living underneath it. And I thought, it's going to be a tough year next year for these guys, but they're back again. They're up again.
Plenty around again this year, but probably not as many as 2 years ago. So they do seem to, just sort of go up and down in distribution, I think.
Yeah.
Has anybody else?
Sorry.
Has anybody else noticed a really good increase in robin's pincushion this year? Seems to have been everywhere. So it's not on oak.
There do seem to be a lot about, but I think it must be one of our commonest galls, really.
Yes, I know. But
We see it, I don't know.
Well, in my experience, if you want a gall to disappear, start studying it, because the next year you can't find it. And this happened with robin's pincushion with us. And a couple of years ago, it was, it seems to be like the pea gall you mentioned on oak. As a kid, I can remember seeing, tons of pea galls. I haven't seen it for about 8 years now. It just seems to have gone.
Yeah, no, I've never seen one.
I think there's an interesting story about nopper gall, isn't there? A couple of years back, or a few years back, I was quite worried about oak trees because not many of them seem to be capable of producing acorns because of all the nopper galls. But now, as I understand it, there's a whole set of parasitoids that have arrived and are now parasitizing the causa.
Yeah, you get this with newly introduced galls. The marble gall, when it was first introduced, it became very abundant, spread north and eastwards from Devonshire. And there was a newspaper campaign in the Telegraph to get people to go out and crush the marble galls because they were worried about pannage. Exactly the same story in exactly the same newspaper with nopper galls in about 1970. This time it was by Professor Crawley, who was trying to get some research money to say that this was going to destroy the acorn crop and the jays wouldn't survive and so on and so forth. So me and him had a little tete-a-tete via the telegraph at the time. But, you know, the newly introduced species, sooner or later, and again, Graham Stone's people up at Edinburgh have shown that there are now lots of parasitoids on these new galls. Yeah. Good fun, though, good fun.
Absolutely.
Very interesting.
Alan, in the promo for this talk, it was mentioned that having had the talk, we could then go out and find them. So is this time of the year, you know, the best time to go and look for them?
Yes, this is definitely the best time, and you'll find loads, particularly around where you are, Ed. I find that national forest plantations, quite new plantations, are often really places to look. I don't know why. You feel they should be on ancient oaks, but they seem to be on saplings and small trees. Maybe you can just see them better and reach them. While you're there, look for leaf mines as well. The two things often go together.
Well, hold on, Sue. That's a whole other talk. That's a whole other evening you're getting into there.
No. Yeah, you'll see lots of other things while you're looking for galls. It teaches you to be observant, I think, and you know, there are no techniques involved. You don't have to go out with nets or pitfall traps or complicated suction samplers like Alan does all the time. You know, it's just looking and using your eyes. So,
can I say thank you?
Yeah.
Yes, please do. Absolutely. Yeah.
She's got me going.
Good.
Thank you.
In addition to the National Forest, I'd also say there's a lot of woodland trust land and parcels with 20-year-old oak trees. All of those millennium oaks that were planted in their hundreds of thousands around the millennium are probably quite rich sources of galls now. And as Sue says, you can actually reach them. You can reach the lower branches quite easily. So there's plenty of woodland trust sites. So if you go on the woodland, we've got a lot listed on NatureSpot. On the Wild Places Guide, but if you go on the Woodland Trust website, you can put in your location and they will tell you all of the nearest sites to them. And there's a lot of very new woodlands and there's a lot of oak trees in all of those woodlands. Wonderful. So they're always worth checking as well.
And it's a very good year for acorns.
Yeah.
So never mind the knopper galls, they haven't hurt. No.
Can I just point out that the British Plant Gall Society's website has just put a whole load of photographs of galls on. It's a new collection. It's Michael Shinnery photographs. I think, I don't know how many hundred he's put on. So if you just click onto the site, click onto the photo gallery, and then there's a list of sort of Mike galls and so on and so forth, and you can find your way in. And like everything Michael does, they're quality pictures. They're not all his, but the majority are.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
I've done my advertising.
Yeah, no, that's all right. British. It's we're into out sharing quality resources. I just ask people, if you're in Leicestershire and Rutland and you find one of these galls, please do record it via the NatureSpot website. If you're not quite sure what it is, your records will attract some attention and we'll be able to give you some advice. If you're elsewhere, if you're not in Leicestershire and Rutland, iRecord is the place to submit your records. Chris, I don't know if the Society picks records up from iRecord.
I honestly don't know. We have our own recording scheme, which is done via MapMate by a lady called Janet Boyd, who manages it. She's down in Cornwall. But I admit that I'm not an active recorder.
I have checked with Janet.
I'll go and hide away now. I tend to be sticking holes in galls and looking to see what's inside them.
Okay, so if you're in Leicestershire and Rutland, please send your records to Nature Spot, and we'll certainly help you with identification. If you're elsewhere, sounds like the British Plant Gall Society might be your best bet. So,
sorry, Alan, if you have a downloadable survey form which they like you to use, because I think it's in a format that can then go straight into MapMate. I have checked with Janet, and I don't think she takes data off iRecord. So I think I touched on it earlier. It's really difficult. There isn't a single category that you can just sort of say, dear iRecord, please gall records.
I think I would concur with that. Yeah.
Really confusing. I think it's we can do that on Nature Spot more easily because we have sort of separated them out. But that leads me on to a really important thing which I should have said is if you are recording them, you absolutely must note the host plant because if you don't, your record may not actually be of any value because people won't know if you're recording the gall or the gall causer. So, and now if you record on Nature Spot, there is a little category on most of them where you can just click on a drop down and you'll be able to say it's a gall, but then don't forget to put in the notes on oak, etc., etc. It's my lecture.
Thanks very much, Sue. Thanks to Sue and thank you to Chris for your contribution.